Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Snap Tech Podcast with me and Jasper here in Munich in English Garden. Today we're gonna start a topic that we've been kind of avoiding a little bit. So we're gonna be talking about AI and LLMs. I still refuse to call them AI because I don't think there's intelligence, so I'm gonna call them LLMs, so you can call them whatever you want.
Let's stick with LLMs for now.
So the AI revolution of the LLM tools, over the last about 3 months, there's been massive tipping point of the capabilities in coding. And we've been, of course, in the organization experimenting with them quite heavily. Our view being long time that they are kind of amplifiers of whatever you put in and what you put out. But these also the capabilities of producing code and software with real data very quickly is creating new opportunities for us. So what's your take on where we're going to head on?
So, yeah, there's a really large sort of spectrum of topics to talk about here. We could kind of just start with, what do we mean by amplifying versus enablement? And
especially in context of code products. Right?
Yeah, let's for now just stick with writing code, right? So if I ran an experiment actually, where I took a programming language I knew nothing about, in a platform I knew nothing about. So I built a bit of software in a programming language that a lot of people would not have heard of, called Gleam, which runs within a sort of Erlang kind of environment. Nothing I've ever touched before. And of course I could generate running software, and that's great. So it enabled me to write code in a language and a platform I knew nothing about. But did that amplify my skills? Not really, because I came to the test project knowing nothing, and I was able to go from 0 to 10, 20% of ability, right? However, if somebody who's been writing that code for 10 years or however long, 5 years non-stop, and understands the underlying runtime, understands language, using AI will amplify their existing skills, and they will not just be able to kind of do the basic stuff, they will take their skills and be able to be much more productive, build a lot faster, maybe even better software, but they will be much more in control over what's going on. And I think that's really where amplification comes in. And the kind of like the bottom line with this is I think that AI is going to be great for experts. I think there's this idea that generalists are going to be great with AI. Not 100% convinced by that yet, but I think it's AI for experts makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
So would you say that a junior with LLM tools is just many juniors, and a senior with LLM tools is many seniors? Or
yeah, pretty much. I mean, we've had the experience where we had a fairly junior engineer leaning maybe too heavily on LLMs, and the result was not pretty.
Right.
And it really came across to the customer as well, that, hold on, wait, we're seeing a lot of output, but when they even just spend a small time reviewing what was being done, it was like really clear that the code was not well thought through in as much as a senior would think it through. So the volume becomes almost, if you're not careful, more of a problem than a solution, because it's in that case amplifying the junior nature of the engineer, not enabling them to go from junior to senior.
Right. We've seen signals like this from open source projects where they blocked all LLM code because that a lot of people are just
that's right,
spitting whatever they can in the project just to get the green dot on GitHub, right?
And just taking it out of coding for 1 second, I think this idea of amplifying and enablement can be seen outside of code on a piece of work we were involved in last year, where there were a lot of, so the project really required subject matter expertise, deep, real understanding. The kind of the pitch of the project that we were part of was like to bring kind of world-class expertise, but a lot of the juniors didn't have that world-class expertise. And so the documents they were generating, which were in this case more like specifications, they were not incorrect, but they were just like a bit too superficial. Anybody who's been in that field for a while would very quickly look through it and go like, it's just sort of platitudes and just kind of like very surface level kind of analysis of what's going on. So I think that this amplification versus enablement goes across code and other factors. Enablement is great, right? Being able to, you've been doing some stuff that has enabled you to go from zero to something which would have taken you a lot longer to do. So I'm not saying we shouldn't embrace enablement, but enablement is great at certain stages in projects. But when you really get into production systems and serious software, you really still want the experts running the show.
I'd say even in the enablement phase, so I haven't been writing code for maybe 3 years, but I spent 25 years writing code before. So these experiments I've been doing, I quite heavily lean on my architecture understanding. So I can't just, well, I can, but the results will be very bad if I just prompt saying, build this kind of thing. There's going to be whatever. So I quite carefully still architect the software, saying, build me a database, cache this in the database, make sure the calls are not hammering the backend. And I identify things like, performance issues are here, there's probably drawing overhead or whatever, and I can prompt the LLM to explore that. And usually the LLM finds the problem once I point it out. But I'd say, so there's been this kind of fear in the dev community, and I think some of the resistance towards these tools comes from the idea that they will replace us. But I don't think it does. I think devs can be quite safe, their jobs are safe. The experience of system architecture and software architecture and the libraries and the tooling is still extremely valuable, because that's going to be the backbone of building software that can actually be built rapidly and can run somewhere. But I think devs do need to look at the world now a bit differently. The way we build software is going to change. I think it has to, right?
So I think you touch on an interesting point. Is like we're talking about developers because we're engineers. We come from an engineering background. I think we haven't quite touched on the whole experience of building software within an organization, because of course developers are just one part of a team. And as engineers, you know that if you just optimize one part of a system without optimizing the other part, if you've got a database that has no indexes, it doesn't matter what else you optimize, that's going to be a bottleneck, right? And in the same way that if you have an engineering team that's optimized because it's using LLMs to be more effective at writing code, that's great. But if the other parts of the software development process are not optimized, then they're going to become the bottleneck. So the perception at the moment, and I think it's kind of perception, is that engineers are the bottleneck, right? And if we can only make engineers more effective, we can get a better throughput out into production. But my experience over all these years is that the reason why the engineers look like they're a bottleneck is that because the upstream part is feeding low quality into the development team. So the development teams are spending cycles basically cleaning the inputs and managing difficult inputs to create outputs.
I'd make an argument that writing code has never been the problem. Like, it's never been, the slowness of project comes from writing the wrong code. And we've been doing this together now 50 years, probably 55 years. And the problem is often communication. Like, computers are easy to handle, humans are difficult to handle. And the problem with the way, especially people who are very domain knowledgeable, they are unable to communicate to people like developers who might not have the domain knowledge properly, right?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I've always maintained that it's a very difficult task for people with domain knowledge who really understand what's going on to think abstractly about their domain in a way, because software is an abstraction of the real world. So there's no sort of sense of blame in this sense. It's just, and it's been a persistent problem for the last 20, 30 years. And we've lived through, from the rational unified process to extreme programming, on, lots of different attempts to address this back. Now you see things like scaled agile framework, which I'm sure we'll maybe touch on. All these sort of attempts to make the process of defining and building software more accessible and reliable, and I still don't think we've really nailed it.
Yeah, the problems they try to solve, like, let's talk about agile as a kind of clump everything together, and the original idea of Agile was good. It's like, we accept that we don't know what we're going to be building, so let's build it in iterations so we can fine-tune where we're going to go on the way. Now, how it's implemented in organizations has gone wrong. Like people, Agile to people is an excuse to write bad spec, right? That's it. But that's a communication problem. It's in the core of all of these problems, right? And that's what we try to solve. It says Agile. Let's say.
And in a funny way, maybe the problem to start to solve with the LLMs, of course, is more effective engineering, right? Getting more out of your engineering teams. That's fine. But maybe the thing we need to start trying to solve is helping the domain experts actually really fine-tune what it is that they really want. I mean, I'm just thinking about one business where the requirement, they've got these sort of gating process to go through, but the problem is that even though they try and do a gating process and everyone signs off requirements, by the time it comes out into UAT, everybody's like either forgotten the gating process or they haven't really been invested in what that gating process does. Right. And so by the time it comes out to UAT, everyone now wants something different. So the ability to deliver, I mean, what should be delivered in 2 months usually takes 6. And then and it ends up being a messy process because the engineering environment becomes messy. The negative effects radiate out. It's not just a one-time problem. So maybe LLMs can actually solve and help solve that challenge that domain experts have. And my observation is that domain experts understand something when they see it, in the same way that we would understand a building once it's built, but based on the blueprints, we'd have a hard time understanding what it would look like.
Yeah, I think that's a core. We've been in Snap, in the past Snap, we've been talking a lot about the problem of designer development communication and how there's a similar type of a problem there where a design is quite abstract and developers might not understand it. And our solution for this one was to move to software as the source of truth as soon as possible and start talking about deltas instead of absolute. So you don't say this margin need to be 15% and then the developer gets it wrong, the designer says yells it louder. Right. That doesn't help. But then you go like it needs to be five pixels less. Then you understand what the thing is. And when the software becomes the communication tool, that's going to be. We humans are very good at saying what we don't want, right? I can't explain you what I want, but when I see something else, that's not what I want. And I think that's where the LLMs might be super powerful.
I think there's some other factors that have got to come into play here. I think, so the reality is we've had opportunities in the past to build pretty high fidelity, early stage versions of software that domain experts can respond to and so forth. And sometimes that works. I'm thinking as far back as things like the horrendous Microsoft front page and Dreamweaver for web, design tools, like you got into kind of Figma, and actually even before that you had Zeppelin and these sort of tools where you can create very high fidelity designs that domain experts can probe and just say, yeah, that's what I want or that's not. So that capability's been there, but there's something else that's kind of missing, I think. I think in a funny way, LLMs is going to bring a bigger change, because I think people are going to be ready to change because the narrative at the moment is like, change or become obsolete. Right. So I think we have an opportunity to say, well, listen, here's maybe not a radically new, different way of doing things, but this is the way things always should have been done. And using LLMs to do things the right way might be, in a strange way, more acceptable because it's like now I'm embracing the modern world versus maybe just doing things with designs where people were still.
I think I agree here. The change is going to be much more than just developers writing code faster. That's not the change we're looking for. That wasn't the problem. The problem was elsewhere. Now developers might be writing code faster as well, but that's going to be a side effect of thing. The problem we're here to solve is the communication problem.
And well, I think there's going to be this effect as well that those organizations that are already pretty capable at that will, again, LLM is going to amplify their capability and they're going to move ahead faster and faster and faster. And the gap between those companies and the ones who are struggling it's just going to become more and more noticeable. I'm going to start shipping more. I'm going to be able to integrate, other products. I'm going to be able to address different needs in the market, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas the ones who are really struggling, LLM's not going to help them move faster unless they actually have a much deeper change outside of just the development team. And my guess is there's going to be a huge amount of frustration where companies are going to invest time, money, personal capital, in terms of reputational capital into getting engineering teams LLM enabled, whatever that means, only to find that actually the result is not so great. And then there's going to be a lot of sort of unhappiness and questions asked as why is this not improving our performance overall. And I think that the important thing is to look upstream as to kind of what's feeding into the engineering teams.
Cool. I think this might be a good place to stop.
Yeah.
We have some ideas for the next thing as well. I think we're hinting some what we're going to be talking about the next episodes.
Right.
But this is a kind of a start of a longer journey for this one.
Definitely.
Thanks everybody for joining and talk to you again next time.
See ya.